Hey man, most men spend their entire lives in torment because they fall into the trap of trying to understand women. They think if they analyze her enough, if they listen long enough, if they study her moods deeply enough, they'll finally crack the code. But here's the truth, there is no code to crack. Women are not puzzles to be solved. They are storms to be weathered. They shift with their emotions. They contradict themselves. They rewrite reality depending on how they feel in the moment. And when you as a man try to map that chaos with logic, you only end up confusing yourself, doubting your own mind, and draining your masculine energy. Women do not live in the same world men live in. Men live in the world of facts, permanence, commitments, and structure. Women live in the world of emotions, impulses, and shifting truths. What she feels today is real for her today, but tomorrow, that feeling may be gone, replaced by something else entirely. That's why trying to understand her words is a waste of time. When she says, "I'll never leave you," she means it in that moment. When she says, "I love you more than anything," she means it in that moment. But when her feelings change, her truth changes too. You cannot understand this in logical terms because it's not logic, it's emotional fluidity, and the man who tries to pin it down will drown in frustration. Here's the brutal reality. Women often don't even understand themselves. How many times have you heard a woman say, "I don't know why I feel this way"? That's because her emotions rise like tides without reason, and she moves with them, even when they contradict yesterday's choices. So if she cannot fully understand her own heart, what makes you think you can? That's why trying to decode her every word, her every silence, her every action is a waste. You'll tie yourself into knots trying to explain contradictions that were never meant to make sense. And while you're spinning in circles, she'll lose respect for you because she doesn't want you to figure her out. She wants you to remain unshaken while she swirls in chaos. Men who try to understand women often destroy themselves in the process. They start questioning their own judgment, second-guessing their own instincts, and bending their entire reality to fit hers. If she says you're neglecting her, even after you've given her everything, you start doubting yourself. If she says you don't love her enough, even after your actions prove it, you wonder if she's right, and before long, you're living in her emotional world instead of your logical one. That's how men lose themselves, by abandoning their masculine frame to try and decode the feminine mind. But the truth is, you're not meant to decode it. You're meant to lead through it, unshaken, unbent, unmoved. The real secret is this: you don't win by understanding women, you win by understanding yourself. A man anchored in his purpose doesn't need to solve her contradictions, he simply allows them to exist without shaking his ground. He doesn't argue with her shifting emotions, he observes them and stays steady. He doesn't waste energy trying to fix her moods, he focuses on his mission and lets her moods rise and fall around him. Women are not looking for men who can understand their every emotional fluctuation, they're looking for men who can withstand it without break. That's the real strength. And once you realize this, you stop chasing comprehension and you start embodying calm, stability, and power. When you try to understand women, you unconsciously hand them the frame. You make them the center of your focus, the subject of your study, the puzzle you're desperate to solve. And in doing so, you step out of your masculine power and into her emotional world. That's why she loses respect for you. Not because you weren't attentive, but because you made her chaos more important than your clarity. Women don't want a man who lives in their storms. They want a man who can stand firm while the storm rages, who can let her emotional winds blow and still keep his footing. When you stop trying to understand her, you reclaim the frame. You show her that her moods don't shake your mission, her contradictions don't rewrite your truth, and her impulses don't derail your vision. Think of the countless men who wasted years dissecting every word a woman said, every look she gave, every silence she left hanging. They obsessed over why she pulled back, why she suddenly grew cold, why her love seemed to evaporate overnight. And in that obsession, they lost themselves. They forgot their mission, their discipline, their identity. They became prisoners of her emotional weather. That's why men walk away from relationships feeling empty, because they spend all their energy trying to decode a world that was never meant to make sense to them. The truth is, the more you try to understand her, the less she respects you. Because women don't respect men who get lost in their emotions, they respect men who remain unmoved while still caring. Women are meant to be experienced, not explained. Their beauty is in their fluidity, their unpredictability, their chaos. They are the waves, and you are the shore. The waves crash, shift, and retreat. They rise high one day and fall low the next. If you as the shore try to chase every wave, you'll crumble. But if you remain steady, you give the waves something to crash against, something that grounds them, something that shapes them without ever moving yourself. That's the masculine role. Not to understand, but to hold. Not to argue with the tides, but to remain solid while they ebb and flow. That's why the strongest men are the calmest men. They've stopped fighting the storm and learned to stand still through it. Here's the irony. The less you try to understand women, the more they reveal themselves to you. Because when you stop probing, analyzing, and dissecting, you create space for them to simply be. And when a woman feels she can be herself without you trying to decode her every move, she actually becomes more open, more vulnerable, more real. That's why stoic men attract women so deeply. They don't chase answers, they create space. They don't beg for explanations. They let her contradictions exist without judgment. And in that calm acceptance, she reveals more than she ever would to a man who interrogates her every emotion. In other words, your strength comes not from understanding her, but from allowing her to unfold naturally around your presence. The truth is this: women don't even want you to understand them. They want you to stand firm while they shift. They want you to lead while they wander. They want you to stay certain while they doubt. That's the polarity that keeps attraction alive. If you try to fully understand her, you collapse into her world and lose polarity. You become another emotional being swimming in her tides, and she no longer sees you as the anchor she craves. But when you refuse to chase comprehension, when you stand in truth without needing every answer, she feels what she truly longs for, your steadiness. She doesn't need you to understand her, brother. She needs you to withstand her, and the moment you accept that difference is the moment you win. Every man who has ever tried to argue with a woman's emotions using logic has already lost. You can present fact, timelines, proof, even her own words, and it won't matter, because she isn't living in facts, she's living in the emotions of right now. When she's angry, your logic won't soothe her. When she feels neglected, your evidence won't reassure her. When she decides you've failed her, even if you've done everything right, no argument can win. That's why men who chase understanding fall into endless cycles of debate, always trying to fix what was never broken, always trying to explain what was never logical to begin with. The truth is, brother, you don't need to win arguments, you need to stop stepping into them. The deeper danger of trying to understand women is that it steals your masculine clarity. The more you focus on her emotions, the less you focus on your mission. You start adjusting your life to keep her happy, making choices based on how she feels instead of what you know is right. You become reactive, bending every time she bends, shifting every time she shifts, and before long you're no longer leading, you're following her emotional weather. That's why so many men feel drained in relationships. It's not the woman who broke them, it's their decision to abandon their frame in an endless quest to decode her moods. When you give up your clarity, you lose yourself, and when you lose yourself, you lose her respect. Women are designed to test men, and those tests are not supposed to make sense. They are emotional stress tests, ways of probing your strength, your patience, your ability to stay calm under pressure. When she contradicts herself, when she questions you unfairly, when she changes her story, it's not about logic, it's about seeing if you will crumble. If you snap, argue, or desperately try to make sense of it all, you fail the test. But if you stay calm, steady, unbothered, she feels the strength she was looking for. That's why trying to understand her is weakness, but holding frame is strength. She doesn't want your analysis, she wants your solidity. Think of women like music. Music is not meant to be dissected, note by note until you've destroyed its rhythm. It's meant to be experienced. You don't need to understand every chord progression to feel the power of a song. And the same goes for women. If you try to break them down logically, you lose the beauty, the mystery, the polarity that makes them magnetic. You're not supposed to get it. You're supposed to let it be what it is and remain grounded as it plays. A man who tries to overanalyze ruins the song. A man who listens without losing himself enjoys the music. That's the difference between frustration and mastery. Here's the liberating truth. Once you stop trying to understand women, you free yourself from disappointment. You stop expecting consistency from inconsistency. You stop expecting permanence from temporary emotions. You stop expecting logic from chaos. And in that freedom, you finally see clearly. You stop taking her words as eternal promises and instead treat them as reflections of her feelings in the moment. You stop expecting her moods to be stable and instead accept them as waves. You stop getting hurt by contradictions because you realize they were never supposed to add up. That shift, brother, is what separates the man who keeps getting destroyed from the man who stays untouchable. The greatest gift you can give yourself is detachment from her contradictions. When she says one thing today and another tomorrow, you don't waste time trying to reconcile it. You don't sit awake at night replaying conversations, dissecting texts, wondering if you misread her tone. You let her contradictions exist without disturbing your mind, because the truth is, her words will always shift. Today she wants stability, tomorrow she craves excitement. Today she wants freedom, tomorrow she begs for closeness. If you chase understanding, you'll run in circles forever. But if you accept that her emotions are fluid, you stop running. You simply watch, listen, and remain grounded. That's when you gain peace, because you've stopped fighting a battle you can never win. When you stop trying to understand women, you also stop giving away your power. Think of how many men hand over their frame in search of answers. She grows distant, and he starts chasing, asking what he did wrong. She gets moody, and he bends, apologizing for things he didn't do. She pulls away, and he follows, desperate to bring her back. Every one of those moves is weakness, because the more you try to understand her, the more she realizes she controls your emotions. But the man who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't demand answers, that man terrifies her in the best way, because she knows she cannot move him, and women respect the man they cannot move. Stop falling for the trap of her explanations. Women will often give you reasons for their actions, but those reasons are rarely the truth. They are the story her emotions created in the moment. She'll say she needed space because you were too busy, when in reality, her feelings simply shifted. She'll say she pulled back because you weren't attentive, when in reality, she was chasing a new thrill. If you try to understand her words, you'll be chasing ghosts. That's why wise men don't get lost in explanations. They look at patterns. Patterns never lie. If her actions contradict her words, trust the actions. The man who looks at behavior instead of explanations never gets fooled. Peace comes when you stop trying to understand and start accepting reality. The reality is that women are emotional beings, guided by feelings that change often. The reality is that her words are temporary, her moods unpredictable, her expectations fluid, and the sooner you stop expecting her to be like you, logical, consistent, principle-driven, the freer you become. That freedom isn't bitterness, it's clarity. You stop trying to mold her into something she's not. You stop blaming yourself for her shifts. You stop demanding explanations that don't exist. And once you live in that clarity, you can actually enjoy women without being enslaved by them, because you've stopped expecting permanence from impermanence. Here's the irony. The less you try to understand women, the more they're drawn to you. Because women aren't attracted to men who study them like textbooks. They're attracted to men who remain unshaken by their storms. When you don't argue with her moods, when you don't demand explanations, when you let her contradictions flow without losing your frame, she feels something rare, safety. Not safety in the sense of comfort, but safety in the sense that she can be her chaotic self without breaking you. That's what pulls her closer. Because deep down, she doesn't even want to be understood. She wants to be anchored, and the man who anchors himself in truth becomes irresistible. Once you stop trying to understand women, you stop arguing with reality. You no longer expect consistency from inconsistency, permanence from impermanence, or logic from chaos. And that shift is liberating. Instead of obsessing over why she changed, why she contradicted herself, why she pulled away, you accept that's what women do. You stop personalizing it. You stop thinking, what did I do wrong? And start realizing, this is simply her nature. And once you see it that way, you stop bleeding energy into overthinking. You conserve your power. You save your focus for your mission. You reclaim the time and peace that countless men waste trying to decode the feminine mind. Men who stop trying to understand women suddenly become unpredictable, and unpredictability is magnetic. Why? Because when you're not chasing answers, you're not reacting. And when you're not reacting, you move with calm detachment. That calm detachment makes her wonder about you. She asks herself questions. Why isn't he affected? Why doesn't he argue back? Why does he seem so steady, no matter what I do? And those questions keep her invested. You flip the script. Instead of you trying to understand her, she tries to understand you. That's the position of power. That's the masculine role. And when she's the one questioning and wondering, you've already won the game. Another benefit is that you become immune to manipulation. Women often weaponize confusion, contradicting themselves, shifting stories, rewriting the past, all to tilt you off balance. Men who chase understanding fall straight into the trap, twisting themselves into knots, trying to reconcile what can't be reconciled. But when you no longer need to understand her, those weapons lose power. She can contradict herself, and you'll simply nod. She can accuse you unfairly, and you'll remain calm. She can shift the story, and you won't fight to correct it. You'll simply trust your own truth. That's unbreakable frame. And once you live there, no manipulation can touch you. The deeper truth is this: women were never meant to be understood. They were meant to be led, not in domination, not in cruelty, but in steadiness. A leader doesn't need to understand every emotion of his team. He needs to remain firm so they can rely on him. The same is true in relationships. She doesn't need you to dissect her feelings. She needs you to be solid while she rides them out. She doesn't want you drowning with her. She wants you to stand on the shore, extending your hand when she's ready. That's why men who lead calmly, who don't chase comprehension, end up with the most respect, because they give her what no one else can: stability in a world of chaos. So here's the ultimate truth: stop trying to understand women. Stop wasting your life decoding contradictions that don't add up. Stop losing your frame in storms that were never yours to control. Instead, understand yourself. Build your discipline, your mission, your clarity. Stand firm, no matter what she feels, says, or does. Let her storms pass while you remain unmoved. Because women don't fall for the man who understands them, they fall for the man who withstands them. And when you live this way, you stop being confused, drained, or broken. You become free. Free from illusions, free from overthinking, free from chaos. That's not just how you win with women, that's how you win at life.